It's a recording of a broadcast by Jack Friedmann on the timeless test played at Kingsmead, Durban in March 1939. The broadcast was from the studios of Inner East 96.5 FM at Heidelberg. The broadcast was made on the 20th of November 2002.
Well, they're not 12 playing days, but it was a 12-day test match. Imagine how riveting that would have been. Jack Friedmann, welcome to 96.5. I hope you don't mind me telling people how old you are, because you're one of the most sprightly 87-year-olds I've ever met, and you've still got a full set of marbles. And I've eaten some of those Joe's meatballs. Meatballs, yes. Jack Friedmann, as you might have gathered by his accent, is a South African who's been living in Australia for a while, but he's a journalist, or a retired journalist at 87, you're entitled to be retired. But Jack, what was your association with this timeless test?
Well, I was the sports editor of the South African Sports Press Association, at that time, and I suppose my little bit of knowledge of cricket, I captained the side in one of the very lower leagues, and I suppose that they thought that made me a candidate for reporting the MCC cricket tour of South Africa in 1938. It began in 1938. That was Wally Hammond's side, and he brought with him 4 of the players who played the previous season in Australia, and the rest of the team, of course, they'd lost to the Australian side. I think the Australian got the
Australia retained the Ashes.
Yes, they retained the Ashes then, and they were playing in South Africa. And so, to give you a bit of the background to the timeless test, the situation was that 4 test matches had been played. England had won 1, and the third was drawn. And I'm talking about South Africa now, of course. And the International Cricket Board decided in their wisdom that the final test should be played to a finish. In other words, there was no limit, or supposedly no limit, to the time in which the match was going to be played. Well, in actual fact, it extended over 12 days. It's incredible. Well, 2 of the days they didn't play because it was Sunday, and then at that time it had some religious significance in South Africa, so there was no play on that day. They went on for 10 days, actually. They actually supposed to play 10 days, but one of the days was washed out by rain, and so it actually covered a period of 9 days of play. Well, as you can imagine, it was very much defensive cricket, and
did you have to actually report on this and make readable copy for the newspaper?
Yes. Well, I had a double assignment, actually. What is quite interesting, I had to cover for the South African newspapers, and just to give you an idea, today you have these immediate replays of matches, and you have the television covers. There was no television in those days, of course, and the sole link with the outside world, as far as the media were concerned, was a telegraphist who sat at the back of the press box, typing in Morse code your messages to the nearest post office, from which the messages were then sent around the world. Well, I was covering, as I say, for the South African Press Association, and I was also assigned to report for Reuters in London. So I dare say some of my cabled messages to London, which went through this telegraphist, eventually landed up in Australia and appeared in the Australia media. So I did have a connection with Australia even then, in some manner of speaking.
How did you make it interesting?
Well, you just had to report what was happening on the field. I just remember one particular instance, where you'd have microphones next to the wicket now, I believe, and in those days you could only hear what was said on this if somebody spoke very loudly. And Ken Farnes, the English fast bowler, happened to strike Peter van der Bijl, who was the opening bat for South Africa. Peter's son Vincent might be known to a later generation. Vincent van der Bijl played, I think, in Oz, and he was a fast bowler. Vincent was, at least Peter van der Velde, his father, was struck by a rising ball on the ribs, and in those days they didn't have all the protection you have in cricket today. So he was struck high up on the ribs with a ball from Ken Farnes, and I can still hear his voice echoing over the ground in his very Oxfordish accent. Oh, bother! Really, yes. So I dare say some other things were said on the field which weren't recordable, but I didn't report those. I can't remember that there were running commentaries on radio matches, the radio broadcasts on the matches. There was a chap from the BBC, I think Johnson was his name, who used to do periodical broadcasts and round up the match at the end of the day. And then the other link with outside world, so to speak, were the cameramen. There were newsreels taken at the time. I don't think they were full-length one. They were shown on the newsreels in the cinemas later in the day or the following day. And then the ordinary newspaper photographers. So that was the only recording, as opposed to today where, as I said, you have the replays instantly, you have the constant reporting of the match on TV. And well, Jack, this is really interesting stuff, and I think maybe we'll come back to you, but I think we'd better play some music, or I might have a few axes poised above my head here. But let's listen to an appropriate tune, Frank Sinatra with You Lucky People You, and we'll come back to the story of the timeless test. We've got Jack Friedmann as our guest in the studio today, and he's got some great, interesting stories to tell. We'll try and cover a few topics here, but it's fascinating, this timeless test. But let's listen to Frank Sinatra. A sprightly 87-year-old who is a retired journalist who covered some momentous times, both in sport and generally, and he also is involved with a community bank in the Doncaster area, which he'll tell us about in just a moment. But just to tie up what you were saying about the timeless test, which is something I've never heard of before, a hysterical moment in cricket in history. Jack, you were saying that there were many breaks for weather and for religious observance, and the test went on for how many days again? It was 9 in all. 9. And Jack had to make this interesting in order to report it for the press. And what were we saying before I really interrupted? No, just very good. It was appropriate for the times, actually. No, the situation was that the reason for the timeless test was in order to play the match to a finish, and as a result, the players reckoned they had all the time in the world, and it was very, very slow batting. And there were some remarkable performances in the match. Perhaps the fact that there were no less than 6 players reached 3-figure totals in their respective innings. And would you believe that there was another one who scored 99? And perhaps the most remarkable of those innings was won by a chap called Bill Edridge. He'd failed dismally in the previous 4 tests, and Wally Hammond's faith as captain in this player paid off. Bill went on to score actually a double century in England's second innings, while Wally Hammond himself contributed 140 in that innings. As you can imagine, as I said earlier, there was a very slow play, and for instance, it took Dudley Norse for South Africa 364 minutes, over 6 hours to reach his century. And then Peter Gibbs, the England's wicketkeeper, was only 2 minutes faster in scoring his 3-figure total.
Gee, that would never be tolerated today. They'd be throwing things over the fence.
That's right. They're really tolerant crowd then. And then I'd just like to finish off on one particularly interesting point. When England had to bat the second time, they faced the seemingly, well, I should say impossible task of compiling 696 runs in the 4th innings session to win. And this is into the 9th playing day. In the event, they compiled a record 654 runs with 5 wickets in hand. They were only 43 runs short of victory. However, the weather began to intervene and the match had to be abandoned and declared drawn. Now, I must tell you,
are these results in any record books? Was this officially recognised as a proper test match?
Yes, it's covered in many statistics. Wisdoms and others have got the full record of the match.
So it still exists as a test cricketing record?
Yes, and it's amazing. The reason, I must say, for this sudden end of the game when the match was drawn was the fact that the English team travelled only by train all over South Africa, and they came to South Africa by boat and had to go back by boat. So the match was abandoned because otherwise the British team would have, the English team would have missed the ship. So that was the end of a game, an incredible game. And it resulted actually, there was a lot of criticism about playing timeless test. The cricketers, the spectators, the selectors and others involved in administration of cricket realised it was a stupid arrangement, and as the match was played on a very good wicket, it lasted all that time, and this was the last of the timeless test, so it was never played again.
Jack, we could talk for hours about all this sort of thing, but we must press on. But on a more personal note, how long have you been in Australia?
I've been over 8 years now.
Just 8 years?
Yeah, and liking it very much.
And you came here because of family connections?
Yes, that was the base.
Your children are here?
Yes, I've got a son in New Zealand, daughter here, and that's the link actually. And also crime was rising in South Africa, and we felt
that was scary.
And older folks were the target, you know, so we thought Australia was a good place. We visited several times, liked the country, and of course now I'm a confirmed Aussie together with my wife. We've had freedom, we're both confirmed Aussies.
And what's your involvement with this community bank? How did you get involved?
Well, I was a foundation member of the steering committee which brought the bank to its state now, where it's got a financial company running the bank.
Is that one associated with the Bendigo Bank, or is it independent?
Yes, no, it's very much a branch of the Bendigo Bank. Bendigo provide all the services to the bank, so the bank will be able to, when it opens in possibly February next year, or January even, I'm not sure of the date. We've got premises, and we've oversubscribed for our shareholding.
That's great.
And
so there is a demand. Avoiding the big banks, the major banks, and getting into more community-minded banks.
Yes, there's definitely a very strong support. We're on the road to fitting out our premises. We're almost set for, well, as I say, the premises have to be completed. We've got the premises, of course, and they're very conveniently situated on the main road in East Doncaster East.
New Jackson Court.
It's part of Jackson Court. It's
facing Doncaster Road.
Yeah, that's right. 900 Doncaster Road.
So the fit-out's nearly finished and the bank's almost operational?
Not quite finished, no. We're on the road to getting people in to fit out the bank. My own role now is I'm not on the board of directors. My age precluded me from becoming one, although I wouldn't like to be.
I'd say you're quite capable. Amazing.
Anyway, we were very delighted, and we need to thank all the people who supported us right through. We had in pledges over $1 million, which is the record figure for people before we opened the bank, and I think we sent back I don't know how many thousands of checks, value in checks, thousands of dollars in checks. Oversubscribed. So the subscription lists are closed, the bank's on its way, and as I say, we're very grateful to the support that we've had all around. And
we're grateful that you're keeping us up to date with what's happening, and we may have you in again to talk about the bank when it's operational, because I'm sure we can digress to a lot of other interesting topics with your vast experience, Jack. It's been lovely having you here, and I really appreciate the trouble you've gone to get out here to the Warringah Shopping Centre and Radio 96.5 Inner FM. Jack has some amazing stories to tell, and I'm looking forward to speaking to Jack again. Of course, I have to wait till Bruce Skiggs takes a few days off before I can get Jack in here, but it's not the first time and it won't be the last. Thank you very much, Jack.
Thank you, and I may say that I don't agree with the fact that I once broadcast from the BBC in London and now broadcasting from your station. Anything of a come down.
That's a move up the ladder.
Yes, I see.
Okay, well, we'll have a few messages from the people who keep us on air, and I'll just have a little word to it, Jack, and see if there's anything that we've overlooked, and we'll be right back after this. I guess, Jack, before you go, you've got a little interesting anecdote as regards the cricket match we were just talking about just before you go. Would you like to tell us?
Yes, it was quite amusing. Headley Verity had played in the previous Test series in Australia. He was the spin bowler and left-arm spin bowler, and incredibly he sent down 766 deliveries, would you believe it, in the timeless Test. He told me this story about they were playing a state match in Australia, and the 12th man was very eager to please, and he was watching the skipper like a hawk. And when he saw the skipper sort of wave his hand to one side, he dashed round to on the outfield, dashed round smartly to the position he thought he had to occupy, only to be waved back by the skipper very angrily. And he did this a second time until he discovered that the skipper was actually waving flies off his face. So that's the Australian salute. Yes.
Oh, thank you, Jack, for this interesting little story about the timeless test. I'm sure a lot of us have never heard of it, and we'll all be checking out cricket record books to see if there's mention of it. And maybe it'll foster some more discussion on how Test cricket came to be restricted to 5 days and maybe even 3 days. And recently the Pakistan match, 2 days. I think one-day cricket's had a great effect on cricket in general, because the batsmen go out like their lives depend on it and thrash the ball all over the place, and it's made for a much more interesting game that is more acceptable to the public. And I guess TV has also brought cricket to a whole new audience. But we really appreciate hearing men of your experience come up with some of the tales of days of old, and I look forward to talking to you again in depth about the game of cricket and other things, Jack. Thank you very much for being here with us today, and we look forward to our next meeting.
And thank you, Sam, and thank you, 96.5.